our Seeing Data project. And I think that it contradicts the argument that as data acquire more power, so objective and rational forms of thinking come to dominate and to predominate. If it's the case that most people access data through their visual representation, then we have an entanglement of the numeric and the visual, and this stirs up emotions. And that's what we found on Seeing Data, and there's an article that's just come out in Sociology that kind of makes this argument. So I'm not going to go into lots of detail here, you can read more about it elsewhere, but we found emotional responses to lots of different elements of data visualization in our research. Visualizations in general, data, visual style, subject matter, source or media location, and also people's sense of their own confidence and skills to make sense of data. So here's someone telling us that they felt confused and stupid looking at data visualizations. I just want to briefly describe one example where two participants who work for a civil society organisation looked at these visualizations of how migration is represented in the British press and felt strong feelings of sorrow, shame and guilt. And so here quantification is not distancing, right, as it is claimed. The visualization translated data back into people, bringing the human subjects who are the centre of the visualization close to viewers, and you can see it in this quote here. So, my argument here is that while quantification might distance, the visualization of quantities diminishes distance, and this makes it possible to feel numbers. So it's a strong line of argument of ours, that the feeling of numbers. And this matters for lots of reasons. It matters because currently people feel stupid looking at data, statistics and their visual representation, as we found repeatedly in our research. And I would say that that's got something to do with the cognitive rational way in which we learn statistics. And so this answers a question that me and Dan were talking about last night: what can design do? Well, what I want to see is a project that uses design-based, arts-based, feelings-based approaches to engaging with data to see what the results of that are in terms of statistical literacy. And I think this really matters in terms of inclusion, because there are serious issues of exclusion here. If we took feelings seriously in relation to data and visualization, we might be addressing that serious issue. So to give an example, I don't know if anybody saw the Office for National Statistics app where you could find out how well you knew your neighbourhood. It was released a couple of years ago. So it asked you to guess how many people out of 100 fit a particular category, and then it tells you the real answer. So here's me knowing my neighbourhood really well. I thought 20 out of 100 people were under 16, 17 were. Here's me knowing my neighbourhood really badly. I thought 80 out of 100 would have a mortgage or a loan, and it's only 37. So Alan Smith does a great TED talk about this app, which crashed due to public demand. And he says, not only did I achieve my lifetime's ambition of making a statistics website crash due to public demand, but also this is a story about what happens when people relate emotionally to data. They were enjoying themselves, they were having fun, and they were experiencing other emotions. And that is witnessed in a lot of the social media comments. So to end, I want to suggest that finally the feeling of numbers also really matters right at this moment in relation to the dismissal of experts and questioning of truth claims based on data that have characterised recent political events and news stories and have led to the assertion that we're living in a time of post-truth politics in which facts and data are increasingly devalued. And this completely contradicts the argument that data are acquiring more power, right? All of a sudden, data have no power it's emotions that matter. It's not the facts and the statistics, it's people's emotional responses. But the problem with that argument, I want to suggest, is that it assumes that data and emotions sit in different places. And what I'm arguing here is that they are intricately interwoven. People's everyday experiences of datafication are emotional, visceral, and affective. They're central aspects of experience. They inform and are informed by reason and rational judgment. So understanding data, how data and emotions relate to each other in people's everyday experience will help us make sense of these current post-truth claims, I argue, and maybe even help us to find a way out of it. So just to sum up, I think I've got a minute or two left, no minutes left. So just to say, I have done this interweaving of different perspectives and approaches to data visualization. What I want to argue is that they all matter, and that we have to find a way of thinking about data visualization and working with data visualization that holds on to all of these things, which is challenging because they're contradictory, but they're also all true, I would go as far as to say. Thank you.
Questions? Do we have a mic?
It's here. No, this is the second one, but you need to turn it on somehow, Joe.
Okay.
This mic here.
Without your glasses.
Just go ahead and ask the question. There you go, shout out.
That's easy. Thanks, that was really, really good. And very engaging and informative. And it kept making me wonder about what you meant about that tension between these contradictory positions and the idea of mobilising publics. So the thing about data visualisation is clean and simplifies and cleans up the messes, it's actionable, but it creates, well, it moves people, it creates those feelings. And it's like, where are the trade-offs? Because I kept thinking about Florence Nightingale's rose Potsdam diagrams, and the whole reason she got to them was because several attempts to persuade the government through a long, dry discussion of the intricacies of the statistics that she'd gathered was that it was easier to ignore. The rose diagrams were harder, much harder to ignore. So how do you see those trade-offs? I mean, it's, you clearly recognise them, but how, what's the pragmatic way of making decisions about those kind of critical issues?
I mean, I don't know if I think they're trade-offs, but yeah, I think that this is a space where we can stand on the sidelines shouting critically, which cultural studies is historically very good at doing, or we could walk into the space and try to problem solve, which design, I would say, is very good at doing historically. And I think that, yeah, some of the things that Drucker argues for, this sort of making visible of all of those processes, is one way of doing it. Attempting to equip people with tools and devices to do their own data visualization is a way of working towards more understanding of those processes. And there's interesting work going on. There's a woman called Catherine D'Ignazio, who's associated with MIT, who's produced this set of tools for activists. So I think it's not easy, but I think it is worth trying to do. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to say in conclusion is that I feel like the sort of critical position that says this is another form of kind of governmentality and control, it's too easy. And I actually think I would go as far as describing it as empirically inaccurate, right? Because that is not what's happening in the world, that it's only that. And so, yeah, I think it's a messy space, and there are people that are trying to operate within it in different ways, including some of the ways that I've described. I mean, maybe one of the things is ditching the conventions and going into more experimental space, but then you've got the issue that then you're maybe not simplifying in the way that more conventional approaches might do. And it's really quite interesting how visualizations are used in mainstream media and news organisations. It's bar charts and line charts, you know, on the whole, 99% of the time. And there's a reason for that, which is around clarity, simplicity, familiarity. But I hope that answers your question in some way.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I have a question. Your definition for data visualizations is basically the representation and presentation of data to facilitate understanding. But I'm now writing a paper myself about a project in which an artist visualizes the data flows in our society. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of how he translates that is also through sound. So he also makes the data audible. So are we placing perhaps too much emphasis on the visual and making data tangible can be achieved in many, many other ways?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's Andy Clerk's definition. It isn't mine, really. I think I threw it up in case there was anyone in the room that didn't know what I was talking about, and it allowed me to simply get past that and move on to saying the things that I wanted to say, and I think you could question and problematise that definition. And he is, you know, talking about particular kind of purposes and intents. But yes, I think there are increasingly experiments to represent data in lots of different forms. There's experiments with materialisation of data, and there's a guy at Sheffield Hallam University called Ian Gwilt who would strongly argue that visualisations remain abstract, and actually being able to touch a visualisation makes it much more material and concrete. The BBC News are experimenting with audio representations of data on the radio. So I can't remember the name of the guy, but I can try and dig it up. They're talking about finances. They were having sort of coins drop on a table, and basically the longer that sound lasted, the more money we're talking about. So there's definitely room for lots of ways of doing it. But I do think that I'm interested in people's everyday engagements with data visualization, and I haven't really looked at or engaged a lot with arts-based practice, and I know there's lots of interesting stuff going on in that domain, but I think on the whole, that isn't how non-experts encounter data visualization, data at the moment. I think on the whole, they encounter it through visual representations, and that's why I've stayed there. But your point is completely valid and interesting.
There has been an opera piece written by a fund manager, you know, getting all the data from daily trading and turning it into an opera. It's called Open Cry Opera.
What's it called?
Open Cry.
Open Cry.
Yeah, I think referring to the old system of trading, you know, that people were face to face.
Yeah. And there's other performance experiments with data as well. That's one next door.
Any other questions? Yeah, back.
Thanks for that, Alan. I just had a question about like the context in which visualizations are viewed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, visualizations wouldn't appear on their own. They're accompanied by text, or maybe there's someone loudly explaining to you who's a scientist.
Yeah.
So did that come out along your interviews that it matters what that context is?
Yes, definitely. It's one of the things that people have emotional responses to, that kind of context. And our overarching research was about, was about what factors influence people's engagements and responses, and context was a big one of them. And text does really matter in terms of titling, annotation, accompanying text, legend, axes, scale. The words used matter. And we did some of our research with Asian women's group who talked about the fact that English wasn't their first language, got in the way of engaging with visualization, so they are not wholly visual. But at the same time, you can sometimes at a glance get what's going on in a data set, get patterns, or surprises through the visual representation.
Final question, perhaps. Sorry, some of them. Oh, wait, they're both at the same time. What can I say?
Take them both and I will go on.
Okay, we'll take them both at the same time, perhaps.
Hi, hello. I was asking myself as a designer if all this approach and methodologies could be also applied to the people that is creating the algorithms that are usually behind all these visualization methods. So all this questioning and challenge that we confront as designers, but it's just one layer of the process of this data. So you.
Do you want to take it?
I can try and link it. It seems like there are within kind of graphical representations of data, quantitative data, there are mechanisms to represent uncertainty, but we haven't seen them deployed in your examples very often. And I wonder if that's just a product of the data that's being used, or whether or not there's a reason, whether it's part of the language of visualization not to represent uncertainty. I just wonder if you have a comment, maybe you can link them, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, first, definitely, the software is an actor. I'm sure a lot of people in this room would agree with that. So it doesn't just start with the designer, it starts before that, and not just visualization software, but data gathering software as well, for sure. I think, again, it comes back to my focus, which was on visualization circulating in the everyday. You know, uncertainty kind of gets kept out of that a bit because it's seen to be a bit too much for people to cope with or a bit too complicated. But there are kind of mainstream actors, data folk at the BBC were thinking about how can we visualise complexity, and kind of centres that are thinking about that. So density design at the University of Milan come out of complexity theory. So I think there is an engagement within the very broader field of data visualization, but not so much in what I've been looking at.
I think we have to move on, actually. We're going to be late, but thanks again, Helen, for being here.
So now we're splitting into two sessions, so we've sort of 2 minute like comfort break, no keep swapping or anything like that. And then one session which will be governing public, which will be upstairs in CO1, and the other session which is provoking public will be here in A27. Starting at 3 o'clock.